Synchronicities. I would imagine that most of you have had meaningful coincidences occur. I'll tell you briefly one that happened to me one time. I'm into watches. I like watches. It's my thing. And Seiko makes, well, they've stopped making it, the SKX series. They're dive watches, they're tool watches. Watch geeks like them. And I wanted an SKX 11 because I'd seen it on YouTube. And the regular SKX, well, it comes in a number of colors, but the 11 is orange. And I thought, that's a little unusual. I want that. And then one day, a guy from work started sending me pictures of his watch collection because for those of you that aren't into watches, I know that makes no sense, but if you're a watch guy, it happens. And he had an SKX. It was black, and I wanted orange, but it was an SKX. And so I said to him, hey, I wouldn't mind trading you something for that SKX. I've been wanting one of those. And he said, no, I like it. I'm going to keep it. And I said, okay. Now, mind you, it was an SKX. It wasn't what I really wanted. I wanted an SKX 11. I wanted the orange one. But that one would have been nice. So, inexplicably to me, at the time, within a minute or two of this exchange, I decided to gather up some of the watches that I don't wear and take them next door. Now, mind you, my next door neighbor, Joe B., he's a watch guy too. So, I took some watches over there and I said, Joe B., I've got some watches I don't wear anymore. Are any of these of any interest to you? And he looks through and he pulls out this Invicta I had. And he said, I like this one. And I said, well, what have you got that you'd like to trade? And what I honestly expected him to do was to bring either out a watch case or maybe a few watches that he doesn't wear anymore. But that's not what he did. He brought one watch. He brought an orange dial Seiko SKX 11 J model. And again, you guys are probably not watch collectors, but in the Seiko lineup there are K models and J models. A K model is made in Malaysia, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Pretty sure they have the same tools and dies in Malaysia as what they have in Japan. Probably the same quality control. If you want to tell the time, a K model Seiko is going to do a fantastic job of that. But if you want bragging rights, if you want a watch that checks all the boxes as a collector, you want that J model. Because that's made in Japan. It says it right there on the dial too, made in Japan. He brought out a J model. So literally 10, maybe 15 minutes after this exchange with this other guy who said, no, I'm going to keep my SKX, I was in possession, I was the owner of an orange dial SKX 11 J model. What a coincidence. What a synchronicity. Now, here's the question. Is it a coincidence or is it a synchronicity? And I used to struggle with this a little bit because, I don't want to call horses zebras, and maybe it was just a coincidence, just a really lucky coincidence. So, here's the thing. There's no such thing as a coincidence. Let me put it in another. Let me give you another analogy. Let's say that I hand you a throwing die, and I take one, and you pitch yours at the wall, and I pitch mine at the wall, and we both get a 6. Is that a coincidence? Or is it a synchronicity? Well, I've led you down a false path because maybe that's not a synchronicity. Because it doesn't have any significance. It doesn't have any meaning. But it's not a coincidence either. Why is it not a coincidence? The only reason why we think the throw of a die is random is not because it's random. There's nothing random about the throw of a die. What's true about the roll of a die is that you could, with absolute 100% accuracy, predict which number will show on the top of the die each and every time without fail forever if you can measure for and accurately account for all of the variables that affect which side of that die lands face up. But I don't know anyone that can do that. I shake a die in my hand, toss it into the air. How much torque? How hard did I toss it? How much sweat is on my hand? How fast is the wind blowing? How much friction is on the surface the die lands on? On and on and on and on. Somewhere near but less than infinity number of variables. But if you could measure and account for all of them, then before the die comes to rest, you could predict which side is going to be up, because you know all the variables. Everything that happens happened for a reason. There were variables that caused it to happen. Now, you may be unable to measure those variables. You may be unaware of some of those variables. Some of those variables may have taken place thousands of years ago in another country. Some of those variables took place when one star and another star collided and shifted ever so slightly the location of our sun in its solar system. But just because you can't measure all those variables doesn't mean they don't exist. And nothing would be the way it is right now if any of those variables were different. So there are things at play. There are connections. There are energetic resonances. There are aspects of reality that are behind the curtain to our ability to perceive, to calculate. But that doesn't mean that what's happening is random. It's not random. It's happening for a reason. Now, what's happening may not be particularly meaningful to you, but when it is meaningful to you, that's because at some level you and your environment are in sync.